Good evening, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of Western Governors University's College of IT's Data Analytics Fireside Chat. For those of you that I haven't met before, my name is Dr. Joe Dery. I'm the Dean and Vice President of Data Analytics here in the College of IT, and I'm coming to you from a thunderstorm-filled Boston, Massachusetts today. So I apologize in advance if I suddenly disappear mid-conversation, but you'll be in good hands with the team. I'm really excited about the theme of tonight's Fireside Chat, which is all about analytics entrepreneurship. And we're also going to touch on low-code, no-code platforms and solutions. And when I think back to when I was starting my career as a data scientist, when I was a hands-on keyboard data scientist and later a manager and leader, there were so many entrepreneurial themes that really came across our day-to-day work. We were justifying the products that we were building, the solutions we were building. We were looking for funding. We were talking about return on investment. We were giving elevator pitches and rocket pitches, trying to get people excited and to drink the analytics Kool-Aid. In a lot of ways, we were building an analytics company within corporations. And we did that at EMC and later Dell Technologies, where I spent my career. So I'm really excited to have two analytics entrepreneurs here with us this evening. And I'm going to introduce them in just a second. And they're also going to talk a little bit about the product that they brought to light, Savant Labs, and where low-code, no-code automation and workflows come into the analytics lifecycle. So to begin, we have Kshetrang Shah and Matthew Mesher. So Kshetrang is the founder of Savant Labs, a no-code, low-code analytics automation startup. Before Savant, he built data and analytics products at 3 other startups and played an instrumental role in their successful outcomes. He started his career at IBM, a company many of you know, as an engineer working on databases and applications. He has a master's degree in computer science from Rochester Tech and a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from SP University in India. So welcome, Kshetrang. We appreciate you joining us today.
Thank you, Joe.
And
looking forward to the conversation.
And we have Matt, who is the co-founder and chief analyst at Savant Labs. As we mentioned, the no-code, low-code analytics automation startup that you're going to learn all about this evening. He has been an analytics junkie, and I love that terminology, by the way, his whole life, scraping data from the web and playing with it in spreadsheets starting in grade school. I think you definitely had a leg up on me there, Matt. He studied economics and math at Stanford, has worked in public policy and tech startups. He's built analytics and pipelines for state governors, Fortune 500 companies, cutting-edge startups, and is passionate about making analytics easier and more widely available for everyone. Welcome, Matt. Thanks for joining us as well. Oh, I think you're muted there, my friend.
There we go. Thanks, Joe. Really glad to be here.
Awesome. So I'd like to start off with something that's not necessarily tied to your company or to entrepreneurship, but just to level set, and it's something I like to ask all of the guests on this series, which is what analytics means to each of you. And maybe as you're thinking about that response, you can maybe layer in a little bit. How has it changed over time? Has it changed over time? So Kshetrang, we'd like to start with you. Do you want to kick off?
Actually, Matt's a better one to answer on that, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, of
I'll
course.
hand it off to him for that.
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question. One I love to talk about. I usually think of analytics as a bit of thoughtfulness plus action. I think when we think of analysis, we think a lot about the thoughtful side. And I also really like to remind people it's about driving to an action. You sometimes hear this term analysis paralysis that can come up, right? And that's what happens if you focus just on the thoughtful part and not the action. So it's really about results at the end of the day. That's what you always want to be focused on with your analytics. And what I've really noticed, having done this now for a long time, things have really changed a lot in the last 5 to 10 years. It's no longer just about this, obsession, I think, about pure hard tech skills. There's tons of tooling and capabilities everywhere now, and it's getting easier and easier for folks to use. And what really drives the needle now is finding folks who are just incredible critical thinkers. That's the number one thing. And then the ability to communicate around that. So, the critical thinking part, I usually try to describe as if you can do if then else reasoning, thoughtful step-by-step thinking, that makes you usually a great critical thinker. And then the other part of that, the communication, this is where it gets tricky. great analysts oftentimes want to show all their work. They want to explain the step-by-step they did. But when they're really trying to encourage action through the analytics they did, and they want to communicate that back, the trick is to really be thoughtful and not show all your work, but communicate almost backwards. Really start with a conclusion, and that's what gets people excited and drives the action. So great analysts and great analytics is about thoughtfulness. It's about action. It's about compelling a result. And if you just do half the job, you'll just do half the job. So I'm super, super excited about this. And I really love how the space has evolved. The tooling have come together. So now if you're just a great critical thinker, you can go think with data and you can really communicate around it to everyone else. And it's just such an exciting time to be in analytics. I'm really excited to dive into all of this today.
On the inside right now, I'm smiling so big, and I think I'm doing it externally too, because when you're giving your explanation, Matt, there wasn't a lot of focus on data or math or programming, which a lot of people are very quick to go to when they think about analytics definitions. But you spent time talking about really that affecting change, driving results. You mentioned the if then else thinking, the communication and the storytelling. And, you can kind of start to see where this entrepreneurial seed is going to start to plant as we go through the conversation, right? But you really talked about bringing and driving value with what you're doing. And I really appreciate that you started off with that.
Yeah, the one thing I'd add is, the best analysts, I would say, aren't the most technical. They're the ones who have real world experience. And when I say communicate, I mean they really understand the people and the processes they're trying to help with analytics. They speak the language of it, they know it inside and out. Some of the most technically skilled people frankly, make some of the worst analysts because they don't have that real world experience and understanding. So if you can start with that, you're miles ahead of everyone else. And that I think is really the key to great analytics these days.
Very
Yeah, I'll
insightful.
give you a quick example. We have a customer, a chief revenue officer. He's always complaining about how they have so many dashboards, but dashboards don't do anything for him. It's a classic example of how analytics is not driving decisions. And ultimately, you just picked on one very specific problem is that, look, I have, 10,000 customers. I want to know who was my customer that was happy last week and is not happy with me today and why, right? Dashboard doesn't tell that story. I need people to give me actionable insights that I can make use of and improve the outcome for the company. And that's, I think, where the difference between analytics as a dashboard versus analytics as an output that somebody can actually use makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and if you are an analyst who has customer team or sales experience, you're going to be the right person to be able to tell the story about the customer. If you're doing data work and you've never talked to a customer in your life, you're probably not going to be able to build something for your CRO that's going to help them with that pain point that Chong mentioned, right? So this is where that synthesis of like knowing data, but also understanding the business side is just so valuable, so valuable to driving that action.
No, it just kind of reminds me a little bit. I used to have folks that would come to me that said, Joe, what do you do to try to build some of the social skills or the ability to interact with people? So one of the things I used to recommend, and I've mentioned this in a few of the fireside chats, is going out for improv comedy lessons. So kind of whose line is it anyway, and finding a local improv troupe in your area to try that out with. And I'm looking at the attendee list right now, and there's actually a student that's on here right now who wrote a blog with me recently who did actually sign up and did improv comedy. And I think he's actually signing up for the 201 series now. And the other thing is like food service and retail, being a waiter or waitress, being a bartender, just understanding how to start a conversation from nothing and being able to carry it through. And I used to say, if I got an awful beverage from a bartender, if that bartender was really nice and had a great conversation, I was probably still going to leave a 20% tip. Which just kind of gives you a nice little parallel to if you can build that rapport with your stakeholders, with your end users, they'll realize that you're on a journey and things may not be perfect right out of the gate, but you'll work together to really affect change.
Yeah.
So I'd love to build on this a little bit. And, maybe we can tie some of the themes here to entrepreneurship, but I'd love to hear from you guys. What sparked your interest in becoming an entrepreneur? Did you wake up one morning and say, hey, I think I'm going to be an entrepreneur today? Or did you want to be an entrepreneur as a kid? Or did you kind of just fall into it?
Yeah, good question. I'll try, and maybe Matt can chime in. Uh, for me, it wasn't a plan that someday I'm gonna be an entrepreneur. Um, I've always challenged myself to do more than I've done before. I've always competed with myself in that sense. And that's been my passion, if you will. You know, I have a self-taught snowboarder. It took me 5 years to teach me snowboarding, and now I'm a great snowboarder. And I always like to do things that I haven't done before. So as we, grew in our career, um, when I graduated, all I wanted as a software engineer is a job. And then I realized that if I can build analytic applications, maybe I can go and figure out what customers actually need. That's when I left IBM and started, working at a smaller companies that were actually building new software from the ground up. And through that journey, we realized that entrepreneurship is just discovering yourself and taking a bet on yourself, and that's turned into a passion. When we started Savant a few years ago, I didn't think I felt like I was ready. It wasn't like, okay, now I've a checklist of things that I've gone through, and now I'm ready. It was more of a passion and a need, and I felt pursuing this is the best thing I can challenge myself with. And that's how I became an entrepreneur, if you will.
I love that. I love the trusting in yourself and finding your passion aspect. And I'd like to just follow up with one quick question before we go to Matt. You know, you mentioned your career at IBM and then going into startups. And I know this wasn't something we had talked about before, so I hope you bear with me for a second. What are some of the biggest differences from working with a large corporation like IBM and then going into a startup culture and climate?
It's a big change. The way I think about it is you're playing completely different game. In a bigger company, you're exercising your muscle of building alignment, collaborating with people, getting people looking in the same direction, driving in the same direction. In the smaller company, you just don't have resources. And
Mm.
therefore, you're wearing a hat of five different people and you're doing all the work. And you have to find out what personality you are and what works for you. As politicians always come in and say, look, if you don't like to collaborate people, pitch your ideas and sell your ideas, you're not going to do great in politics. It's the same thing that works at a bigger company. If you don't like collaborating, building alignment, and you don't see that as a challenge,
Mm.
you won't enjoy that environment. If you are a builder like I am, and I like to go and build new things, I like to disrupt markets, it's a completely different type of skill, a different type of passion. And that's a big change I saw. And you have to be prepared for doing a lot of grunt work yourself. But if you enjoy that journey, I think you'll be fine at startup. And I'm not saying one thing is better than other. Um, there are lots of people that actually build startups within big companies. You've done it yourself at EMC and Dell. And it's a different type of startup experience than going out and building your own company. And both are great experiences. You just have to know what works for you and what is your passion.
I love that. You know, for the students and the folks looking to get into analytics that are on the call, it really shows the optionality and the choose your own adventure aspect of it. And for folks that are looking to gain experience quickly, I used to always joke that working for a startup is kind of measured in dog years in a lot of ways, right? 1 year at a startup is like 7 years in a corporation. So because of all those different hats and the grunt work that you explained, you know, you're doing a lot of different roles, you have a lot of different responsibilities, but ultimately plays to different skills, different passions to your point, different things that really get you excited to get out of bed in the morning. So I appreciate you giving our students a little bit of a taste of that. So Matt, entrepreneurship, something you dreamed about as a kid? What happened?
No, it's not. But before I go there, I just want to quickly shine a light on something you just said. As someone who came up sort of career-wise in a startup, I was changing roles pretty much every single year, and even within the same startup. And it was a lot of work, but the learning was just amazing. So if you really want to learn a lot, like what you said, Joe, go to a startup. They are incredibly dynamic places. And they're also places that really like to take a bet on people typically. If you may not have the standard, resume for some sort of job, but you come in and you have the right attitude and aptitude. Those are the places that will take a bet on you. And if you show up every day, you will just learn a lot and you will go so far. So as someone who's done it, I cannot say enough good things about doing it. Now, to your question about entrepreneurship, definitely did not. I think it was something as a child I didn't really understand. Even I was like, what is that, and who wants to do that? Someone recently said to me, "There's just two types of entrepreneurs. There's pirates, and there are the romantics." I think of myself as a romantic a lot of ways about this. Like, to me, I got into entrepreneurship because I love to follow my curiosities and my passion, like Chitrang was talking about. And entrepreneurship is the way I can have the most impact with my passions in life. And it just gets me, going every single day, gets me out of bed, and sometimes keeps me up at night because I'm still so passionate and I don't want to go to sleep. So I absolutely love it, and really recommend entrepreneurship for those who have that sort of passion to follow. It's fantastic.
I love following the love and passion aspect versus the pirate. And if you said pirate for some reason, I was going to ask where you were Johnny Depp or where you were Captain Barbosa or something like that. But that's a great way to think about it. I really appreciate that. So I'd love to transition a little bit into where that spark for Savant Labs came from. But maybe before we talk about Savant specifically, could you tell us a little bit about what low code, no code is for the folks that are watching right now that have no idea what we're talking about?
Chitrang, you want to take that one?
Sure, I can try. So the uh, traditionally analytics, any kind of data preparation, cleaning, data transformation required you to gain knowledge of SQL, Python,
Mhm.
statistical libraries. When I was a software engineer at IBM, there were no BI tools to speak of. So you had to literally just write code. And that created a barrier of entry, in my opinion, right? As I went through my journey, there are a lot of really smart data people, but they don't necessarily know how to program. And just because of that, you can't exercise your data skill and be a great analyst, I thought was just doesn't make sense in this world, right? Um, so this term low code, no code came out of the concept that you don't have to be an engineer to do a great analytics. There are potential ways to expose interfaces that are higher level of abstractions that anybody can use, almost like a Lego puzzle.
Mhm.
If you know what you're building and you grab right pieces and you put them together, you should be able to build analytics. So that's where the idea for low code, no code came. Now, I won't say that we invented the concept. Low code, no code applies in many different verticals, many different applications these days. We are just using that concept to support analytics, with the idea that if you're a data savvy person, if you understand Excel enough, you should be able to build a type of analytics that engineers would be able to build. And that's where the term came, if you will.
Okay, that's definitely helpful. So with that in mind, then, where did the decision come from to start a company that focuses on low code, no code, and analytics automation? What inspired you guys to bring that to life?
Um, yeah, I'll
Go
let
ahead.
Matt go first, and then I'll chime in after. Go ahead, man.
Yeah, I'll tell a few stories about, why I felt so compelled that, we need something like this. When I started my first job being an analyst in public policy, we would do these green job reports for all 50 states, the National Governors Association. And that would be a 6-month project. We would do every single segment for every single state by hand, the same kind of stuff over and over again. 6 months. And I thought that seemed silly. So I bought one of those dummy guides to Excel macros, which I'm not a huge fan of for anyone who's ever tried them or is curious. I think there are better ways out there, but taught myself how to do it and was able to cut these 6 month projects down to, I think we were running them in 3 weeks or something, just because, it was a repeated pattern. We were doing it across every segment for all 50 states, just processing the data, templatizing it, presenting it, all the things you want to do. And that was great. Now, no one was really thinking like this back then. So I actually got slapped in the wrist because my manager came in and she was like, I heard macros are security risks. What are you doing? So, fast forward a little bit, I moved over to my startup job, and we weren't doing Excel, but we were doing SQL, and we were building these giant SQL pipelines for Fortune 500 companies, taking in all their sales and marketing data, standardizing it, and then building all sorts of insights and analytics, for companies like EMC and Dell. And at that point too, we build these pipelines. It was sort of hard to have them templatized and reusable. So every time we got a new customer, they were giant 3-6 month implementation jobs, even though the patterns were the same. And then once we had them set up, it was sort of hard to get them to be fully automatable in the way you'd expect them to be. So there'd be, I think running a full refresh would be like a three-week job of like loading in all the files, trying to fix the files. We didn't have good ways to connect to the source systems that this data was coming from, all these cloud apps now, they're like, Salesforce and all the marketing things and everything else. So everything was manual, It took tons of effort. And being at a startup, what we did is we just invested in building our own internal platform to do this. So we had our official product, and then we had this sort of internal product layer we did that helped just kind of automate all those pipelines. And we did a couple different flavors of it, and it was incredibly impactful. And so when we had our exit in 2019, a couple of us got together and we were like, the official product we made was great and it was really cool, but it really seems like the product underneath the product, that layer to sort of give you the ability to connect the data anywhere, transform it and automate the whole process, push it back and just really make it simple, is something that everyone needs. We can't be the only people who wanted to go do this. And we were lucky because we were a startup with a ton of really smart engineers around who could build this internal product for us, but most businesses can't do that. And not only that, there's, 10, 50, 100 million amazing Excel type analysts out there who are probably dying, going back to my first story, right, with the Excel macros, dying for the capabilities that we built for ourselves. So what if we bring together a really easy to use no code, low code automation platform for analytics? So anyone who's a good critical thinker, anyone who likes to tinker with data, to your, more seasoned analytic pros, have the ability to make it just simple to connect the data anywhere, do any sort of analysis you want on it, be able to deliver anything you want back out. And oh, by the way, the whole thing is automatable. So you don't have to keep doing this over and over again by hand, do these 6 month projects, whatever it is. Instead, that thing is automatable and you can go on to the next brilliant idea you have that you want to go work on. And so that was really when we got together after our last startup was acquired, we just couldn't get this idea out of our head. And that's the journey we've been on since.
I love that. And, there's so much floating around in my mind right now, especially around, your prior boss who thought that an Excel macro was going to be a security risk versus what ChatGPT, for example, in a public API risks today.
Yeah.
And I was also, it was interesting to see in the chat window too, somebody was talking about crystal reports, which brought back a whole bunch of memories. But I love how you guys identified an opportunity there and you saw something where you were able to do something that others really wanted to get their hands on. It could really unleash the potential of analytics to a population that didn't have that formal training. So how did this turn into what is now Savant, and what is Savant Labs?
Yeah, let me see if I can explain this. If you look at the space overall, there are two big trends that are going on. There are a set of tools that we traditionally like to call analytic tools. So the BI tools fall under that category. You have Power BI and you have Tableau and you have Looker. Sixth Sense, you name it. There's a bunch of those, right? And then there is some data sciencey type tools. If you're an R user, Python user, you have data IQ type tools that are helping you now build machine learning, predictive models, generative AI, and so on. All of those tools I call analytics tools. They take data and they let you build analytics on it. The problem with all of those tools is that they are not automation tools. So if you do something one time and you want that process to be repeated in a reliable way, they're not a great choice. On the other side, there's a massive industry of what you call automation tools. There are tools to move data. If you've heard of MuleSoft and Workados of the world, Zapier to some extent is also an automation tool. But none of these tools can do analytics in between, right? They can reliably take data from one point and put it to another, but you can't do anything analytics. So the point of analytics and automation as Savant is to bring those two worlds together, meaning, yes, the tool can not only move the data, but it can also reliably help you translate your logic into analytic workflow, which is the important part. I believe analytic development itself is a workflow and it needs to be expressed as a workflow. And so you need to be able to express that and you need to be able to execute it in a repeatable fashion. And that's what analytic automation means. It's not about data visualization. It's very different. The output is a prepared data that can be visualized in a BI tool if you want, but it can also be operationalized by delivering data into the business apps where workflows are automated on top of it, right? So that's the idea. It's a new way of thinking about analytics. People who, as I mentioned, you will go to a business leaders and they'll tell you, I don't want another dashboard. And if you want to serve the business, you want to think about how you help them automate analytics, not just build more dashboards. And that's what Savant helps you solve for.
I love how so much of this ties back to the way that you guys described analytics at the beginning of the discussion, right? It's the ability to really drive results, affect change, execute. And so many analysts, when they first go into whether it's a startup or a corporate setting, they build a great model, they write some great code, but to your point, it's, do you hit a button every single day to run it? Do you try to get a bot to do it? And are you doing that isolated in a workflow, not thinking about that larger kind of a decision intelligence workflow is what I like to think of it as, this orchestration of the business.
Yep.
So I'm kind of curious, do you see when you're working with your customers too, that there's discussions around business processes, process engineering, things like that too, as they're starting to think about these workflows?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the all analytic leaders, companies big and small, have realized two things. One is empowerment of what is the term these days is citizen analysts. And it's the way of saying that there's not enough engineers out there. So people who know data needs to be able to build analytics on their own. And big companies, EMC, Dells of the world, obviously have realized a long time ago, but also many smaller companies are starting to realize that analytics needs to be in the hands of the business. It's number one. And number two, as digital transformation takes over, the organizations are fundamentally rewiring themselves and how they do business. As a result, the business processes are being digitized. And analytics and data are core part of decision making in business processes. So you can't think of them as two separate things anymore. Any business process automation has a data component to it, and data is not just raw data, it's analyzed data that plays into it. So at a CIO level, at CDO level, they're thinking about enterprise architecture that includes analytic automation as part of it, if you will.
I was in a conversation earlier today with some chief analytics and chief data officers in the Boston area. There was a town hall and we got together in a meetup group. And one of the things that came up with ChatGPT and large language models, for example, was the fact that at first everyone was like, implement, implement, implement. And then folks kind of realized, oh, wait a minute, to actually implement some of these things, it's a much larger lift because while you may have a certain piece of tech or code or a model or an algorithm or something, actually figuring out how to take that soup to nuts across a process and automate that process can be a very large undertaking requiring
Very large
change
undertaking.
management, org transformation, digital transformation that you mentioned.
Yeah. That's a great example I always use, that ChatGPT, if you ask a question, will answer. But if
Mhm.
you need to then repeatedly get that same answer back and you need to deliver the result back in an automated fashion for your business, how are you going to do that? That is ChatGPT can do a task for you. It can't automate the workflow for you.
So I have an idea of where this question could go, but I'm kind of curious. What are some of the challenges that you faced at Savant, whether early on or maybe some challenges that you're facing with customers now?
I mean, the challenges are not unique to us in any ways. Any startup, the number
Mhm.
one challenge you have is resources. You have no resources. You have limited time to prove yourself. Um, I'd say um, uh, time and resource tends to be the two most important challenges. But if I were to take this a step down, um, as an entrepreneur, you're trying to solve two problems. You have a hypothesis on what a market needs, um, and you therefore need to think about what is a solution, what does a product look like. So that's a need question you have to answer and validate. But even tougher sometimes is the distribution. How do you get product in the hands of your users? It's much harder to solve for a smaller company, first because you have no brand recognition. You don't have the type of marketing budget that a larger company has to go and, out of in front of thousands of people. Yet you need customers. Otherwise, if you're not generating enough revenue, you go out of business. So how do you figure out a distribution and get in front of the more people without spending a lot of capital is always the art um, of entrepreneurs have to either learn on the job or figure it out or copy somebody else's model, if it's working.
Cool.
I think
Well,
there's
I
a
definitely. Oh, go ahead, Matt.
I was just gonna add, I think there's an impulse when you start to kind of follow like the field of dreams model, like build it and they will come. And that's the thing you have to dissuade yourself of very quickly. You have to go find them, right? And that's where a lot of the art comes in.
Well, Field of Dreams also had, from a movie perspective, a massive marketing budget, right? So,
Yeah, it helps.
great movie, by the way, though. So, I'm curious, as you've had conversations with customers, you've deployed different solutions with Savant. Has your vision from when you first began, so Matt, you were talking about how the idea kind of came together, to where you guys are today, this evening, has that vision evolved at all, or are you pretty close to what you started out with?
Matt, you want to take it?
Yeah, sure. Yes and no. Your vision should be evolving every single day. Like, point one of entrepreneurship into what Chichong was just describing. You should be getting in front of people every day and validating your hypothesis and refining it. And then, sometimes you got to pick yourself back up and get back out in front of the next meeting and learn and keep going. But, you do keep learning. And I think, um, for us, the thing that maybe, at least for me, with my background, I started as an Excel analyst and worked my way into SQL, and then, I suddenly only saw the world through SQL. So when we started the journey, I was really focused on the SQL worldview, and you go and have enough conversations, and you realize that 99% of the analysts out there, those great critical thinkers, they might dabble with SQL, but they're really at heart, they're spreadsheet people. They're people who like to be hands-on with data, and really just refocusing yourself on what those people need. For me, was it was a great just sort of reminder, and it was really fun to have those conversations. But that was, I think, one of the biggest shifts I needed to make for my own journey with this.
Got it. So just really quick for those that are listening. So we're getting into the last few questions here. There is a Q&A functionality in the bottom of the WebEx webinar, bottom right-hand corner. If you want to start thinking about some questions for these guys, you're welcome to put those into the chat. And if we have time at the end, we're going to go actually through the Q&A and have a chance to ask our very gracious guests here to respond. So again, that's in the bottom right-hand corner. Just click the little icon that says Q&A. So guys, I know we've hit a couple of these themes, but maybe if we can pull this together. When you're starting out and you have that original vision, you have that idea, we talked about some of the challenges now. What kind of support, mentorship did you seek when starting the company? How did this impact your journey as entrepreneurs?
I can start. First thing I did is you need to spend a lot of time with your family and really talk it through. I don't think that's a surprise, but there should be no unsaid expectations or anything like that. It's not a commitment just you are making alone. I've had tremendous support from those closest to me, and frankly, a lot of sacrifice goes into it from them as well. So that's the first thing, absolutely. Then taking a step out a little bit, I've been really overwhelmed by the support that my friends have wanted to give me in life, in my closer professional contacts. Without asking, they're asking what they can do to help. They're making intros, they're offering advice, support, all sorts of things, and that's been great. So really, don't be shy to take help. I see sometimes people think they're imposing, but those people really want to support you, and let them. That's one tip I give you. And then the last thing is really do talk to people who have done something like this before, get their perspective. With mentorship, there's sort of no such thing as passive mentorship. If you're going to go find mentors, set up monthly or really usually quarterly, sort of every 3 months cadence, and you want to be somewhat systematic about how you use them, right? Last time we talked about this, let's revisit it. How have things gone? And they're gonna give you not only some tips, but they're really gonna hold you accountable on things in ways, and that's a good thing. And also just talk to people. If you're an entrepreneur, Chong said something earlier about you've got to do 5 different jobs at once. Well, you're lucky if any of those 5 are your skill sets from your previous life. I do a lot of sales, a lot of marketing. I'm an analytics guy, right? So seek out people who have experience doing what you don't have experience in, and ask for their help, ask for their advice, and then really listen, and just take it to heart. And then you'll probably need to come back to them because you realized you thought you understood what they said, and then reality is a great teacher, experience is a great teacher, and then you come back and you're like, oh, that's probably what you actually meant, right? And just keep doing the process, keep building that network of support, and you'll be gaining and growing every day.
Awesome. Can I add one thing to that before we go to any more comments on that one? Somebody brought up something to me recently, which was, how do you network and build relationships in the remote culture or the hybrid culture? And, personally, I just find that it's a different muscle to use. So I keep, for example, a little book that has a lot of my mentors and contacts from over the years. And I try to talk to them 3 to 4 times a year, depending on who they are. And I have the last time, and once a month on my calendar, I have a date where I go and I put these informal one-on-ones on the calendar, and I reach out and say, hey, do you have 15, 20 minutes to chat? No agenda or anything, just a virtual catch up. If they happen to be in the area, maybe we'll try to meet for coffee, though most of them are all over the world. And it is very proactive and it's very intentional that you need to do that. And I think for those that may have before COVID have been in the office and had the ability to in-person network and things like that, it's a different muscle. But if you practice and you refine it and you exercise with it and you get in that rhythm, it can be really, really fruitful.
Yeah, I love that. One thing about a different muscle, you're going to learn everything in entrepreneurship tends to be a different muscle from the one you had. And you just got to keep working it out. And then one day it won't feel like a different muscle anymore and it becomes second nature. So yeah, just build that different muscle every time. It's really worthwhile.
So Chitrang, anything that you want to add to that one?
Yeah, I couldn't emphasize surrounding yourself with people who have done it before. In the world of entrepreneurships, I personally, in the 2 years we've been doing, you want to know what will kill you. and stay away from that. And the people who have done it before will tell you what will kill you. So learn that very quickly, and then the choices are very limited of what you should be doing. So learn from others' mistakes is the number one thing, and the best way to learn from others' mistakes is by talking to them. Talk to as many people as you can. I also believe that nobody has the perfect answer. Everybody has gone through their own journey. So just because something worked for a person or a company doesn't necessarily mean it's the right answer for you. So again, talking to more people, you will get more viewpoint and you'll be able to calibrate what works or what's the right thing for you. So really important in the world of entrepreneurship, in my opinion. And I think the other thing that is cliche, but you have to persevere and have the tenacity to just keep going. If you don't give up, you'll be fine. But the moment you give up is the moment you will fail.
That's great advice. And the trying to figure out what'll kill you. I'm thinking about my 5-year-old that likes to play Mario Kart, and he keeps on thinking that he's going to get extra lives and all these things. But I think that my big takeaway is you're not alone. There's a lot of people out there, and folks are willing to talk to you. They're willing to give advice. You can reach out to them on LinkedIn with a personal message, through a second or third level connection potentially too. And folks like to talk about failures and how they can help you prevent them, right? For the most part, people are really good, willing, and want to help.
Yeah.
I think that's great advice there. So you guys have been across a couple of different startups now. You've had the corporate flair. I'm kind of curious with all your contributions that you've made to the analytics domain, and you've made now in the low code, no code space with Savant. Is there any accomplishment in particular that you're particularly proud of, or something that really stands out for you?
Yeah, man, you want to go first?
Is it the Fireside Chat at Western Governors University? Yeah.
Definitely up there.
I look, for me, it's just making a difference in people's life. The tool that we are building ultimately helps people do their job better, do things that they haven't done before, go home early once in a while, spend time with more family. I think that ultimately brings the joy. As a builder, when you see um, the tool that you build, the product you build is actually helping somebody advance in their career is the biggest accomplishment I see. And we have a number of these customers where analysts have adopted our platform and now able to do great things. And that's very rewarding to see.
Yeah. On that note, I tell a quick story. There's like a baby clothes and toy company that's been around for about 20 plus years. And they're going through their digitization journey now, the transformation. And they had an analyst there who's sort of the tip of the spear there, and he's trying to grow his career, become a manager, and do all that stuff. And even 5 years ago, when you talk about doing this sort of transformation journey, it's usually like a very heavy IT engineering type thing, huge investment, this or that. Um, and instead, this guy was able to, using Savant, using the no code, low code abilities and the all in one capabilities of it, he's been leading their entire digital transformation himself. And he's now like a senior manager on track for director soon, and they're hiring underneath him. And this has all been happening in the last year. And every time I talk to him, there's another amazing update. His COO is in love with the progress and so happy with him. And every time he wants to talk, that's usually makes my week. I'm so excited to hear from him. That's just a really cool thing to see.
Man, you just got mentor vibes all over you, Matt. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's a great story, and I love the one by one there, and really being able to see somebody succeed.
Yeah.
So I have one final question before we go over to the Q&A. So for the folks listening, again, there's the Q&A functionality in the bottom right. You're going to get your chance to ask these analytics entrepreneurs some questions in just a couple of minutes. I'd like to know what advice would either of you have, just quick advice for anyone aspiring to be an entrepreneur in the analytics domain, in the analytics marketplace, maybe a critical lesson that you've learned that kind of drove your success?
I can give two. I'd repeat what Chitrong said about resilience and perseverance. That is just entrepreneurship generally. It's the courage to continue that counts, and like that, that's just, always. That's why it's so important to enroll your family in the people around you. Like it's just amazing the amount of energy when you're feeling low because you can't feel high all the time. The amount of belief and support they have in you is an incredible thing. And also finding that from within is a huge thing. And the second thing, to sort of touch on what I started with, in the analytics space, I think the number one skill today is not technical. It is the soft skill around communication. And if you're going to go be an analytics entrepreneur, you're selling something with analytics. And you need to be a great communicator. And I would first say it's not a binary. It's not you are or you aren't a great communicator. Every single day I'm working on being a better analytics communicator. But it's really, I'll go back to what I sort of led with. It's like start with the impact statement, the end of the slide deck. As an analyst, it's the opposite of thing we normally do, but really learn to communicate the impact. And if you wow them, they're going to ask to see your work. They're going to ask to see all the steps of how you did it, right? And then you have them enrolled. But learn those communication styles for people who don't think like us analysts, right? For people who want to just cut to the chase and want to know why they should care, right? Get them enamored with what you're talking about, and then you can kind of sell them in all the details, and learn that skill incredibly well. It is, again, I think it's the number one differentiator out there for analysts generally. And if you're an analytics entrepreneur, you'll go so far if you can master that.
Chitrong, anything to add?
No, I mean, look, I think Matt said it very well. Communication and perseverance are two most important things that we would recommend. If I were to add third, just believe in yourself is very important. If you there are two sides of the coin. You should fear things, and fear makes you sharp, but don't go to a point where you're not believing in yourself and not taking risks, right? That's also an important aspect of entrepreneurship.
And sorry, just to expand that a tiny bit, it's usually, I find when I talk to folks, it's so much easier to do this not alone, with a partner or with a co-founder too. So find co-partner or co-founders who believe in you and you believe in, and that you want to get up every day and go conquer the world with. That is a huge gift in itself.
Yeah.
And I just had an image of Pinky in the brain or something pop into my head when you said conquer the world there. But I am feeling very inspired to go start a company, my friends, after everything that you've walked us through today. So, Jory, I understand that we have some things in the Q&A here. Do you have a couple of questions that we can pass over to the guys?
Absolutely. We have a ton of great questions in the chat. A couple items that are coming up frequently is in the world of entrepreneurship. How do you overcome the fear of failure, or what if it doesn't work?
Um,
Yeah, go for it, man.
I'm just going to come back to, I think as an analyst in particular, that analysis paralysis problem can be very real. You always want to wait and do a little more thinking and a little more analysis until you have the perfect solution. One of the things I've so valued in having Chitrong as a partner in all of this is he's incredibly execution oriented. And the thing I've learned through that is you don't have the right answer, but you learn so much more by just getting out on a daily basis and asking people what they think about what you're doing, and just get out there. It will, one bad conversation won't kill you. Go for a quick walk if you need to, or whatever it is, and then keep going. And you're never gonna like one day wake up and say I'm ready, right? Or I'm no longer afraid. You just need to take the plunge and go do it, and you'll find it wasn't so bad, and it's actually a lot of fun once you get going. So just do it.
Yeah.
What else do we have, Jory?
This question is for Matt. What books or groups, skills, those types of things do you recommend to improve communication skills?
Oh, my favorite book is Storytelling with Data, I believe it's called. Uh,
I'm looking for it because I have it. Where?
it's the Bible.
It's-
It's fantastic. It's I read it and just like every page, like I reread it from time to time because it's all about simplifying your communication. And it doesn't teach you everything, but it teaches you a lot. The other one, I think it's been around forever. That's never a bad one. It's more of just kind of like a sales mindset is how to win friends and influence people. I think is like that classic from the 30s or 40s or something. It's really short, and what's I love about it as an analyst is it gives this example early on. It's applying to a job and you write a cover letter, and there's two ways to write this. I saw this position open. I have this experience. I've done this, and this. And then there's the other version that's like, I saw this bank job is open. I've done these things, and I think I can do this stuff for you really well. And it's all about talking about action and impact. And it's not so much about like, hey, here's the story of my life, read through it and think if I look at it and like synthesize if this is going to be impactful for you, right? Like you're the analyst, like demonstrate that you know how to do the job, and the job is to take noise and make signal out of it, right? Like your communication should do that. That's not just a quantitative task, that's a qualitative task. And so go find books that are about almost kind of seller's mindset and how you communicate, because that's all about impact communication. So those are two ones I really recommend that I revisit a lot.
Fantastic. What is an underrated skill or experience that you would like to see in a junior analyst just starting their career?
I always hire for attitude and aptitude. That's the two things I always say. Like just I want someone who is looking to learn and hungry and wants, to come to work every day. One of my favorite questions in an interview is tell me about something you've read recently. Just because I want to see their mind work. I want to see them, they get to pick the topic, right? I just want to see them go about their passion. And if, someone has that, it's pretty, you can go really, really far with it. So I'm just looking for that light, with junior analysts first and foremost.
There are a lot of smart people out there. It's not people who want to work hard.
Yeah.
Really quick, back to the book question. They're wanting to get the title of that second book.
Yeah, it's I can look it up, but I think it's how to win friends and influence people, something like that. Pull it up in a second.
I believe that that's a Dale Carnegie book.
That sounds right.
Jory has it on her shelf.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
I was actually around the corner looking at it to see if I was correct. There's been a couple questions about money for startups. One of them is, where do you go to get the money to establish your startup? And where do you go to get money if it fails? And the other part of the question is, what made you go for seed funding versus bootstrapping? Kind of a two-folded question.
Wow, that's an hour-long conversation, but in itself. Bootstrapping versus seed funding, the short answer is bootstrap it if you can. Always a better answer because you are not then at a mercy of investors, and you're on your own timeline. If you can, you should bootstrap. If you need large amount of capital to even get started, bootstrapping is often not an option. So think through, depending on the problem you're trying to solve for, the product could be simple, and you could bootstrap, go for it. If the product needs sizable amount of capital investment, you need multiple years to fine-tune the product, and then you will need venture investment. So consider that in your planning. Where do you go to raise money? There are a number of incubators that are out there. Y Combinator is one. They run a really good program where you come in and build a prototype, you show. There are investors, like 50 investors, that look at your products and demos and they invest money in you. There are a number of others, depending on the geography. Every geography has one of those Y Combinator equivalents, so look for those. Tap into your network in the early days, your people that you work with, people that believe in you are really good investors. They get you started, and then once you have a little more traction, you can go to institutional investors after.
Yeah, I'll add two other quick things. One little trick, see what similar companies, startups are out there and the types of firms that invest in those types of companies. It's a good way to find the types of investors who have the expertise in your space. But the other thing I would say is really think hard about taking, big VC money and that sort of thing, and if that fits with the kind of business you want to build. There's so many great businesses out there that are, I have a couple friends, they are the only person in their company, and they, I think they make several $1 million in revenue every year. And they're lifestyle businesses essentially, right? And they're great lifestyle businesses. And he's very, very happy, for example, in one of these. He loves the life he has. He would never want to sell. Doesn't have ambitions beyond that, all those sort of things. And if you take VC money, that's not the expectation, right? They're expecting you're building for the stars, and you're either going to die trying or you're going to make it. So just, really think hard about what you want to do too, and the type of investor who's the right type for what you want to do. It's really important.
Awesome. Jory, do we have maybe one final quick question?
Absolutely. Kind of going off of your circle of people and making sure you have those folks out there that support you. As a student going to an online school, how would you recommend that they seek mentorships?
Mentorships can come in many different ways. You don't necessarily have to seek your mentorship from from your school. They could come in from your friend circle, your family, your neighbors. I'd highly recommend finding meetups in your local areas that are similar-minded people. It has a network effect of its own, by the way. If you meet similar-minded people, they'll introduce you to other people, and you go from there. There are many online communities, especially for analysts on Reddit. There are very good communities that you can go and join and learn from one another. Be curious if you can. Go to conferences that are vendor specific sometimes, and sometimes practice specific. So those are many different ways where you can meet people and expand from there.
You mentioned meetups as well. There's actually a website called meetups.com, by the way, which I know during COVID I was using very regularly, where I was going into Boston and they would circle between different restaurants, and every month there would be a meetup of just like-minded analytics and data professionals, from entry-level analysts to people aspiring to come into the field to directors and VPs. And they would meet at different locations in the city, very informal, and they would just chat. And you would get to see people of all different seniorities. Sometimes there would be 5 people, sometimes there would be 50 people. And I think folks will find that if you go to meetup.com and some similar websites like that, there are actually quite a few of these in many different parts of the country. Like, it's not a Boston phenomenon, it's not an LA phenomenon. You can find them pretty much everywhere. You just have to look. So on that note, I think we're going to wrap it up. So to Chitrang and to Matt, thank you both so much for sharing your experiences, your advice, your stories, telling us about Savant Labs, where the inspiration came from. I know, like I said, I want to go. I really want to get into entrepreneurship. I want to start something. I'll call you guys later. So for your next venture. But hopefully to all the students, the alumni, the prospective students, our friends and family that are on the phone too, hopefully there are a few tips and tricks here that you can apply to your lives right now, to your journey to help you along the way. And I look forward to seeing you in episode 9 of the Fireside Chat, which is coming in late July. And we're going to be joined by Kamal Distal, who's the VP of Analytics at Toyota. So we've got a little bit of a different spin on things. And we have a very special guest who's an influencer on LinkedIn, who's an absolutely phenomenal person who we're going to tell you more about in August. So keep an eye out for that. So thank you everyone very much for joining. I'm glad I didn't lose power from the thunderstorms. And I hope to see you with the next episode soon. Take care.
So thank you, Joe.
Thanks, Joe.